is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Father Dynasty. I am your fatherly host, Chew, here in the manhole, here to talk a little fatherhood and a little Dynasty fantasy football. On this week's episode, I give a shout out to those parents with multiple kids, the repercussions of colorful language with children in the car, and highlights of hot Dynasty topics per Reddit. Before I dive in, I did want to thank all the current and future Dynasty daddies for all your support. And please check out the website, www.fatherdynasty.com. Cannot believe that wasn't taken. For episodes, host and guest profiles, and much, much more. And in monetizing this podcast, I realize you may have some questions as to where this money is going. Well, all of that Paw Patrol and Spider-Man merchandise for my son and all of my fantasy football league fees will not pay for themselves. So don't worry, no cent is wasted. If you're feeling like your closet is missing something, or your coffee mugs just aren't what they used to be, go ahead to the website and click on the merch store tab to fulfill all of those needs. And follow me on Instagram at Father Dynasty for continued updates on the podcast, merch, and really everything else. And if you happen to be wearing that Father Dynasty apparel or drinking out of that Father Dynasty mug and still feeling like you want to support the podcast, go ahead and you can certainly leave a review either on the website or on whatever medium you choose to watch or listen to the podcast. Any review is appreciated. And for now, only 5 stars are working. I don't know why. We'll work on that. But, if you want to leave a 5-star, go ahead and go for it. But without further ado, here is Fatherhood in 5. So here on Fatherhood in 5, I give an update on my fatherhood experience in what I believe to be 5 minutes. And just thinking about the upcoming NFL Combine, as of this recording, it will be this week. As of the release of this episode, that will be the first day of the NFL Combine. There are certainly some athletic marvels that appear or that are revealed in the Combine by way of quick 40 times, long jumps, high jumps, bench press, any of the cone drills. So there's going to be plenty of athletic freaks or athletic marvels that are revealed tomorrow and over the upcoming week. But it got me thinking back to my second episode of the podcast, which was the vasectisode, where I talk about my vasectomy. And I do not mean to hint that I myself am an athletic marvel because I got a vasectomy. It's not for me to say. But I do consider parents that have more than one kid marvels in their own right. In my opinion, parenting is certainly the most challenging, humbling, and rewarding thing, kind of all wrapped into one. And again, that is only based on the experience I've had thus far of having one kid. The thing that I think about when weighing the pros and the cons of having more kids, I think of the amount of human waste I've smelt, touched, and scrubbed off of walls. Think of the amount of groin shots I've taken. I think of paying for college, where he will undoubtedly be the top of his class and not party his ass off. But then again, I guess when we flip it to the pros, that would mean it's going to be 2 times the high fives and fist bumps, would be a chance to possibly father a sports star, or I guess celebrity overall. And that would mean I would increase the number of caretakers to change my diapers when I'm in the ripe age of whenever that happens. So I guess there's pros and cons to it, and much respect to any parents out there that tackle that endeavor more than one kid. But at the end of the day, as long as you love them and, as long as they're not complete little monsters for you, then more the merrier, I guess. And next to a segment within a segment, this one is called Road Rage Repeats.
Here's what really, really chaps my ass.
So this is a new segment. I think every parent can certainly empathize and sympathize with this one, is maybe saying the wrong thing while driving the car, just in the heat of the moment, in the heat of road rage. And you've got the little kiddos in the car, and maybe they repeat exactly what you just said. You hope they don't. You hope they mispronounce it or maybe don't understand the context to use it. The first one for my wife and I, we happen to be driving around, and I think my wife gets credit for this one, but I think it's likely been reinforced by the both of us. His first one was damn, which was funny to hear him repeat it. It wasn't immediately that he repeated it when he heard it, but it was funny in the context that he chose to use it, because we were driving around in a parking lot, And sure enough, someone had cut in front of us or something like that. And it was funny because his immediate response, in the car, slamming on the brakes, he just proclaimed, "Damn," which in context, I would argue that's the perfect time to say that. And it's hilarious that not only did he remember the word, because this was over a year ago, I'm pretty sure. It's funny that he not only knew the word, he knew the context in which to use it. And it was kind of, a quick thing. We were just getting into the parking lot, about to park and go into whatever the store was. So very funny to see how quickly that they can pick up on not only the word, but the context of whatever that word may be, even if it would rather he not say it. And as for myself, I know my generally calm demeanor is not reflected on my driving, as I say some pretty un-G-rated things while I'm behind the wheel. And traditionally, I like to keep it to mostly just emphatic hand gestures. So then I kind of tone down the language, but they clearly get my point as to the fact that I think they're an idiot. So might be a lot of, "What are you doing?" Or maybe hit a little honk, if you will. But generally, when I do any of these things, I drive a little hatchback Suzuki, so that doesn't really come off as very imposing or threatening, which I guess probably is good for me because I don't want to come off as that if I were to get in a road rage incident there. But one of my favorites, and I imagine would be my wife's favorites as well, is we both, traditionally very good about, not saying those bad words or really even anything like remotely close to that. We'll specifically try to say something else, or use the hand gesture. So like you get your point across, like, "What are you doing?" but not actually, saying anything too bad. But it was funny. We were in probably like a Walmart parking lot, and I was driving down through the parking lot. Someone had turned directly in front of me out of a spot or whatever, just across in front of me. And I, of course, could not speak my mind of what I really wanted to say because Finn was in the car. But I honked just to kind of let her know. It was a mixture of like, she didn't do it very quickly, so I couldn't really tell if she didn't see me, which seems impossible, or she just didn't care. But certainly if I did not slow down, I would have just T-boned her in the middle of the parking lot, which was bizarre because she should have been able to see me clear as day. But her response after I honked, doing all this, letting her know, even if someone's in the wrong, I get that they're not gonna be like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Traditionally, they'll at least be like, like whatever, wave their hand and be fine. But this person's choice was interesting. One, they went no faster. They just cut me off. Two, which my wife found hilarious. At the time, I was just kind of blown away that this was the response. They blew a kiss to me, which made me infinitely more mad because it was not only knowing that they were cutting in front of me, it was seeing that I was upset that they cut me off and then just kind of like being okay with it. And also just kind of rubbing it in my face that it's like, you're not going to do anything about it. Not because I have a kid in the car, but just realistically, she's just going to go in her merry way. So am I. It's fine. I think my wife will attest that that was probably one of her favorite ones. And again, not because any bad language was said, as many of the things will be on this segment, if it is in fact a repeat of Road Rage Repeats. But needless to say, it's kind of one of those things. Even after we parked and she was gone and we were going in the store, it was one of those where it's kind of just like kept thinking like, unless you plan to do that when you cut me off, that's incredible that your immediate response to me honking and everything was just to blow a kiss, to be like, basically go fuck yourself. So that is it for Road Rage Repeats. So in this week's Dynasty update, we've got the Reddit or Forget It segment within a segment, as this is apparently the episode of segments within segments. And this is kind of just to pull a couple of things that seem to be hot topics spoken on Reddit, which a lot of it is just things reposted from Bleacher Report, ESPN, whatever else, onto Reddit. So they didn't really report it first. It's just kind of things that people are talking about the most, or at least what I found interesting. And one of the first things, which was a talking point the entire NFL season that just wrapped up, but it's certainly going to be hyped up and continued until something kind of comes to fruition, which is the Jimmy G trade or potential trade. And all season it was kind of spoken about, even spoken about directly to Jimmy G, kind of talking about what he thinks about that whole process of you're playing this season and obviously you're playing well enough, but you were basically just a placeholder for Trey Lance, who they just drafted. And in my opinion, he clearly did well enough at least to earn a starting gig somewhere else. And there probably is at least a bit of respect between the two, between Jimmy G and the 49ers brass, that would want, not let him pick where he wants to go per se, but not just send him to a crap organization. I think much of the buzz was it could be Pittsburgh, could be Washington. Those are the two main ones that I'd seen. I'd seen rumblings about maybe Carolina. Basically, any team that needs a quarterback or would like an upgrade, he's probably been mentioned with them. But it's pretty crazy to think of, and in my mind, I'm thinking it may end up being he goes to Washington, and I think that would add a bit more stability to the role than having Heineke. Although I don't know if it's a big enough step up. Like if you're trying to upgrade the quarterback, I don't know that that's it. I know there's been talk about that Washington definitively wants to upgrade the quarterback. I get why they want to, but I don't really know what they're going to do. Like unless they're getting the Russell Wilson, unless they're getting the Aaron Rodgers, I don't know what else they do. There's nothing else. There's not a lot of other options that are tremendous upgrades. So I'm curious to see how that shakes out. But I do think probably calling Jimmy G to the Washington Commanders, which I don't think I've mentioned this on the pod, is a really stupid name. So next up, we've got Lovie Smith on the Rich Eisen show. When he was talking about Davis Mills, he said he's our quarterback going into the season, which it's not even really committing to say like it's his job to lose. I think it's maybe more so just saying a statement of fact of he is a quarterback on our team. You know, on the active roster, he was the starter ending the season. So barring anything happening, he would be the starter to start the season, or at least into camp. That's also basically the assumption of Deshaun's gone whenever, however that's going to happen. And in my opinion, I do have him in Dynasty, Davis Mills. So I was pretty hyped on him coming into the season, snagging him in the rookie draft. I did snag he, Kyle Trask, and Kellen Mond, and one of my teams just to kind of figure, all right, one of these guys is going to get a shot at some point, whether they earn it or not, whether it's just injuries. Of course, getting Trask was thinking it wouldn't be this season, maybe the next with Brady retiring. He's now retired, so something could happen with that. Mond, you never know. It's just another quarterback. But my initial thought was this is incredible that you got the new coach coming in, which he was already on the coaching staff. It kind of seems like just the not rock the boat type of hire that they always talk about Lovie Smith being, you know, able to connect with the players. And in terms of wins and losses of his most recent head coaching success, it hasn't seemed to be great. And I kind of like with David Culley, I know Lovie Smith obviously has a much longer head coaching resume to his name than David Culley. But it seems like under David Culley, they were able to rally and do pretty well, considering what they were expected to do. But under Lovie Smith, a little more continuity, keep clearing out the cap. You know, now they actually have earlier draft picks instead of having to wait to the third, which was Davis Mills, was the third round draft pick, which was their first pick in last year's draft. But in my opinion, I do think he's earned the right to be the starter, be the presumed starter, kind of his job to lose thing for next year. And it doesn't mean that the team is set up to win an incredible amount of games. But I do think that giving him some more weapons, just improving the team as a whole, and a bit of continuity when it comes to not just wiping out all of the coaches from the previous year, I think that can help him in his growth. And not to say he's going to be a top 10 dynasty quarterback, but when it comes down to it, it's certainly in Superflex. If you can get the one guy that you know is the top 5, top 10, maybe with some rushing upside, that sort of thing, and if you have a couple other quarterbacks that are just those top 20 guys, kind of just the QB2s or just, you know, they're starters. They have some stability to them in terms of knowing they have their role, and they may have some boom games, but hopefully nothing that is, too low. That's what you want in Superflex. If you have that quarterback as your second in Superflex, unless you happen to have just a war chest of stud running backs or wide receivers, that's what Superflex ends up coming down to, is having those quarterbacks be able to plug in. And that's kind of what he is for me. And I guess we'll see what happens with that. So possibly one of the biggest talking points of the offseason, which was very much the case for last offseason, was talking about Aaron Rodgers. And he had his appreciation post that he had probably almost a week ago at this point, thanking a lot of his coaches and players and everything. And he, as most recently reported, talking about his answer coming soon. Who knows what that means? It seems as though the Packers are already kind of getting the ball rolling in terms of restructuring Aaron Jones, clearing up $4 million, Bakhtiari clearing out $8 million, Kenny Clark clearing out $11 million. I believe, since I had made these notes, there's another maybe one or two people that had been restructured as well. And the talk of tagging Devontae Adams, which I understand tagging Devontae Adams, because ideally you can tag him and then get a deal done. But worst case, you tag him, and not like Allen Robinson last year where the Bears tagged him, which I felt terrible for him, and just almost didn't use him at all. Very bizarre, which I would have been furious too. But tagging him, and then whether it's Aaron, whether it's Love, whether it's whatever, keeping Adams at least on the tag and just helping that transition if you're going to end up probably losing him after this year. And related to what I was talking to my buddy Tyler about the other week, he was mentioning the Saints in terms of them perpetually being over the cap and them structuring deals to be able to maneuver, so kind of continuing to kick money down the road. And in the moment it helps, it allows you to, you end the season at, it's like 70-something million over the cap at the end of this past season, rolling into this offseason. No, they've already made a couple of things, a couple of moves there with, I know, Michael Thomas, and I want to say there's a lineman, and I think they're going to continue to do those sorts of cap gymnastics, if you will, to get back under. But a lot of that stuff it just kind of defers it down the road. And it's really an impediment for the team if you continue to do that, and then you do it with the wrong person. You do it with the person that ends up not being on the team at that point, whether it be because they retire, because just some issues, they're traded. And if that happens, you're then left with that cap hit for a player that's not on there. And then you have to add a player to take their spot and also have their cap hit. And that can work out if you hit on enough young players. But oftentimes it's not the case. And you'd have to hit on even more young players to kind of overcompensate for the fact that you lost a stud, or at least a good, probably reasonably paid player. In the immortal words of fictional commentator Lou Redwood, it's a real shit fucking sandwich. And the last thing to mention here on Reddit or Forget It, and forget it, we will, is hearing that Mason Rudolph is a viable quarterback. I just cannot believe Mason Rudolph can be viewed as a viable quarterback. Coming out of Oklahoma State, I know he did well enough there, and I think there was that belief that he can kind of grow into a starting role. But with Big Ben's injury history since Mason got on the team, Mason's gotten some run as a quarterback. And if I remember correctly, I believe he was a little bit over 500 as his quarterback record, which it doesn't mean that he is an over 500 quarterback. His seemed like more he was the quarterback, and then the team went a little over 500, because he's also had the benefit of great defenses and pretty solid offensive weapons as well. I know that it should be viewed as a improvement after, the shell of Big Ben is now retired. But I don't really know that it is. It seemed as though Big Ben's understanding of the offense and kind of how it was crafted to mostly dink and dunk, but also just work within the system, he could do enough. And overall, you could definitely tell that Big Ben his career was very close to being over. in terms of him being on the back end of his physical ability to be the quarterback that he used to be. We haven't seen that Big Ben in many years, if I'm being honest. But to go from that, even the shell of Big Ben, to Mason Rudolph, or even Dwayne Haskins, I really don't see how you can sell a Pittsburgh fan base on that being the transition. And I'm not a Pittsburgh Steelers fan by any means, but with so many other good pieces around, with the offensive weapons, with the good defense led by TJ Watt, you've got a great coach in Mike Tomlin. I really don't think either sticking with Mason Rudolph or sticking with Dwayne Haskins is going to end well. And even if it's picking one of those guys and you end up with a 500 season, it's likely going to be because of everyone but that quarterback. And having that other quarterback, again, could it be a Jimmy G? Could it be they draft Kenny Pickett? Could it be another veteran possibly? But I feel like it definitely needs to be someone who can elevate the team beyond that average team, only because if you look at their division now too, a lot of things have changed since Big Ben was, I guess, vintage Big Ben. And if they're going to just settle for basically a Mason Rudolph or a Mason Rudolph level talent and quarterback, then I think that they're in for a rude awakening. And that is Reddit or forget it within the Dynasty update. And that wraps it up for this week's episode of Father Dynasty. And I want to again thank you for stopping in, whether you listened to it, whether you watched it. I appreciate the support with the podcast. And stop by the website, www.fatherdynasty.com. Cannot believe that wasn't taken. For any more episodes, merch, as I mentioned before. And I'll be wearing some more soon enough here on the pod. I've got some merch coming in for myself, and want to show that off. And look forward to many more great episodes coming up. Have a couple more guests that I'm lining up as we get into the prospect season for the NFL. As I mentioned, the combine will be getting underway once this episode is released. So looking forward to talking more prospects, getting a little deeper into the Dynasty offseason, and talking fatherhood and talking Dynasty fantasy football. So to all those Dynasty daddies out there,